Do you know what I love? That there's literally no plot holes in pro wrestling. Ever. All storylines make perfect sense, and you're never left scratching your head going, wait a minute. Saying all these things makes me a liar, because even at the best of times, wrestling can sometimes make no sense. We all have a particular moment that we find hard to let go. For example, who in the hell raised the briefcase during the Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shane and Vince McMahon match at King of the Ring 1999? We actually still don't know. How do we not know? Amazingly though, some of the most logical and justifiable pro wrestling narratives come when a wrestler is supposed to take on the role of the bad guy. We may be supposed to boo them, but take a step back and they actually make far more sense than anyone else on the roster. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 wrestling heels who are totally justified. Number 10. Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe has earned your respect. The definition of a guy who has battled to get where he is today. He also fights the good fight and does the right thing, especially when he turned up in NXT. He saved Sami Zayn from Kevin Owens when good old Kev decided he'd try and murder Zayn with a chair, and yet he then waited to be offered a title shot. He tagged with Finn Balor to show his pedigree while stood next to the champ, and yet still he waited to be offered a title shot. Anyone else would have been kicking down doors and demanding what was rightfully theirs by this point, but lovely, warm, affable Joe kept to his morals and merely asked NXT General Manager William Regal if he could have a match for said title. Then he got told no. He had to earn it. Earn it! Despite beating dozens of notable names over the last decade while current main eventers were still wetting their pants. So what did he do? He took matters into his own hands, assaulting Balor and forcing himself into the title picture. And what's wrong with that? What would you do? Sit on your hands and cry to your mummy? That's not what a champion does. Joe had every right to shift the situation in his favor. Number 9. Barry Windham. Imagine you and your best friend in the whole world were about to win some form of trophy for something. I don't know. Eating. You're really good at eating. Anyway, just before you stuff yourself full of hot dogs, you get injured. Your stomach explodes. You can't compete, you're devastated, beside yourself, inconsolable. Then to make it worse, your mate goes and finds another partner and together, they eat more hot dogs than anyone has ever seen. This is essentially what happened between Dustin, I'm now Goldust Runnels, and Barry, I was the stalker in WWF Windham. When the latter was taken out of the picture, Dustin didn't even blink before teaming with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and going on to tag title success. But nothing lasts forever, and when Windham returned, it didn't take long before his relationship with Dustin was back on. At Clash of the Champions 21 in November 1992, however, Goldie showed his true colours. As the duo faced off against Steamboat and his new tag partner Shane Douglas, Runnels refused to pin his former best bud after he suffered an accidental low blow. Realising that he had to take matters into his own hands, Windham tagged himself in and hit Steamboat with 2 atomic drops to capitalise on the situation and to try and render Steamboat without the capacity to father children. With the win but a pinfall away, Windham went to make it official when the offspring of Dusty Rhodes interrupted his own partner's cover. Given that Windham was meant to be the bad guy in this, it should come as little surprise that everyone sided with him at first. The man just wanted to win. Number 8. Bret the Hitman Hart. Depending on how old you are and what country you live in, Bret Hart was the man in 1997, embarking on a fascinating voyage where he would be a heel in America and yet remain a babyface across the rest of the world. It was an original angle that was drowning in sense. At the time, making his triumphant rise to the main event scene was Stone Cold Steve Austin, a foul-mouthed, violent, vicious son of a gun who didn't care about Bret. He didn't care about the fans, he didn't care about his mother, he didn't care that he hadn't paid you back that $20 he owed you, he just didn't care, and the fans lapped it up. This, understandably, enraged Bret. He hadn't changed, the fans had, specifically those in the United States who were leading the Austin charge. They may thirst on this mayhem, but other fans elsewhere did not. They were still more than happy to embrace Hart as a hero. The whole thing made perfect sense, especially as what he was saying on TV masked Bret's real feelings. He actually did think both the WWF and its audience were heading in a poor direction. Number 7. Vince McMahon. Keep in mind everything I've just said. Now think about one of the best feuds in pro wrestling history. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. In the real world, there's probably countless times where you've considered cracking your boss in the head with a chair, or threatening them with a fake gun, or placing their head onto your shoulder before falling to the floor, forcing said shoulder into their chin. It's just standard fodder. But we don't do it, because it's not our company and we have to respect the status quo. Stone Cold Steve Austin thought differently. In fact, he deliberately made McMahon's life a living hell by attacking company officials, refusing to do what he was told, despite being on the payroll, and constantly beating up the boss. Admittedly, McMahon probably deserved it after the Montreal screwjob, but his more dastardly actions towards Stone Cold specifically didn't start until after he'd been pushed too far. So who's the real bad guy here? Number 6. CM Punk. If you get promoted at work, you expect the responsibility and kudos that comes with your new position. Just stands to reason, really. If that doesn't happen, well, It would be like a newly installed janitor getting sass from their own mop. And yet, despite being WWE champion for, at the time, almost 250 days, CM Punk wasn't treated like the top guy in the company. There's many examples of other wrestlers suffering a similar fate, but Punk wasn't just babysitting the title, he was the hottest thing going. Surely the show should have revolved around him. It did on occasion, but that didn't stop John Cena being treated more like a main eventer, or Brock Lesnar, or The Rock. The latter especially rubbed Punk the wrong way. Why was a Hollywood superstar allowed to interrupt the champion, insult him, and make it damn clear that his days were numbered? Punk drove this point home by driving his own knee into The Rock's face as his heel turn slowly began. He'd already reached and grabbed the mythical brass ring, only to find out there was a whole lump of steel to try and latch onto instead. What's a man to do? Number 5. Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho looked up to Shawn Michaels. The man based his style on the Heartbreak Kids, was influenced by his look, and had posters all over his wall as a child. Maybe. I made that last one up. The point being, HBK had Y2J's respect, and then that all fell apart. During a match with Batista at Backlash 2008, special guest referee Chris Jericho took pity on Michaels after he suffered a knee injury. This distraction opened up an opportunity for HBK to hit Sweet Chin Music for the 1-2-3. Jericho was convinced Shawn was faking it until his hero convinced him otherwise. And guess what? That conniving, lying, and sneaky HBK was pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. And apparently that was okay, even when he used yet more deception to beat Jericho at Judgment Day later that year. Is it any surprise then that on the highlight reel, Jericho not only called the crowd out for supporting Shawn's cheating ways, which they did, but also beating the bazinga out of him? Of course not. This was fair revenge. Number 4. The Rock. When The Rock debuted in the WWF as Rocky Maivia in 1996, he was one happy guy. He was essentially what we should all aim to be, a hard-working, nice person who was going to give it his all to get to the top. Cementing the idea that nice guys do indeed finish last, he wasn't treated like this though. It wasn't like he was just booed either. Fans audibly told him to leave this planet through the Die Rocky Die chants. That's right, because he was a good egg, people wanted his life to come to a screeching halt. It's no surprise that he turned heel and joined the Nation of Domination in 1997 when he returned to Raw after suffering a knee injury. I mean, how would you react to individuals that actively wanted you dead just because you were a happy-go-lucky cat? I'm surprised The Rock didn't just throw himself into the crowd and start mauling people. Number 3. Cactus Jack. 1995 ECW was not your by-the-numbers wrestling company. A genuinely unique and, on occasion, violent product, its fans demanded something different from their wrestlers. This was the problem facing Cactus Mick Foley Jack in the mid-90s. Already a hardcore specialist at this point, followers of ECW respected the hell out of him and weren't just going to boo him because they were told to. All this, however, got Mick Foley thinking. All based on the now infamous Kane Dewey promo, which itself was based on his genuine feelings towards a sign he'd seen in the crowd referencing his then 3-year-old son. Cactus tore apart the audience for what they asked from the company's performers. ECW did demand almost unrealistic expectations from its roster, and had no problem showing disdain when someone didn't try and kill themselves. Deciding this logic wasn't enough, mind, Foley also started to work slow, methodical matches while telling people that WCW boss Eric Bischoff was a genius. Number 2. Stephanie McMahon. A word of advice. If you have a daughter, or are planning to have one, don't allow her to be strung up on a cross by some voodoo priest for a weird sacrifice wedding. It won't go down well, and your relationship is undoubtedly going to be put under some strain. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's no reasonable excuse either, other than maybe, well, I thought you'd enjoy it. In 1999 though, Vince McMahon's ever-obsessive quest to get one over Stone Cold Steve Austin led him to believe it was perfectly fine for The Undertaker to do this to his own flesh and blood. So, come Armageddon later that year, is it really that shocking Stephanie McMahon betrayed her father to join up with Triple H due to these exact reasons? Who knows what else he was planning to do? Number 1. The Macho Man Randy Savage. Mates before dates is a saying that has been around for years. In short, it means don't sack off your friends when pursuing a relationship, something Hulk Hogan seemed to forget in late 1988. As he teamed with Randy Savage to form the Mega Powers, Hogan continually upset the Macho Man with how he treated his then wife, Miss Elizabeth. Sure, Savage was being overbearing with his lady, but as a friend, the Hulkster should have understood this and acted accordingly. But he didn't. Not only would he leave Savage to fend for himself in a tag match against the Twin Towers in 1989 after Miss Elizabeth got hurt, but Hogan accidentally eliminated Macho from the Royal Rumble that year too. Savage had every right to smack Hogan in the face. That's not how a friend behaves. That's war. And there's always casualties in war. So there you have it. Maybe we shouldn't have been so quick to boo these guys, especially when they were so just in their actions. Let us know of any others you can think of in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can even follow me on Twitter at SimonMiller316. Thanks for watching, and I'll chat to you again soon.